Beloved, look closely at every moment of this powerful testimony, and witness how the transforming love of Jesus breaks down false beliefs and brings freedom we all seek in the end. My name is Amina, and I was born in Istanbul, Turkey, in 1985. Growing up in a deeply religious Islamic family, my childhood was filled with prayer calls from the central mosque and a community that lived their faith passionately. I was the eldest daughter, and my parents believed Allah had chosen me for something special. My father taught at the local Islamic school, and my mother came from a family of religious scholars. Our home was filled with religious books, discussions about faith, and visitors seeking spiritual advice. My parents don't believe in gender limitations when it comes to religious roles. By age 7, I had memorized many chapters. My family celebrated by inviting relatives and neighbors to hear me recite. Standing in my best dress before the adults, I felt special and important, like I was different from other children of my age. School was strict, but my religious training was even more serious. While other girls played, I spent extra time learning Islamic teachings. My father would look at me with tears of joy, saying I was chosen for something greater than other girls. These words made me carry myself with unusual seriousness for my age. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love to have you join us. We're always excited to welcome thoughtful people like you into this growing community. My brilliance and dedication stood out. The community acknowledged my dedication. During festivals, I was asked to recite verses or lead younger children in prayer. Elders would say I would become a great Islamic scholar. These words filled me with pride and strengthened my belief that my life had a divine purpose. My father always said, Amina, you can do what boys can't do. That made me accept that I am a special child. As I grew older, my identity became completely wrapped up in being a devoted Muslim. I looked at Christians with pity and superiority, truly believing they had lost their way and that Islam was the only true path to God. By my teenage years, I started wearing the hijab with great pride. It wasn't just cloth, it was a symbol showing the world I belonged to Allah and was different from other girls. Walking through Istanbul streets, I held my head high, knowing I represented something pure in a world forgetting God. My dislike for Christians grew stronger. At school, I debated with Christian classmates, always trying to prove Islam's superiority. I had learned many arguments and could quote verses showing how Christianity had been corrupted. Winning these debates gave me satisfaction, believing I was defending Allah's truth. At 16, I attended religious classes at a prestigious Islamic university in Istanbul. The challenging classes excited me. We studied the Quran, Islamic history, Arabic literature, and lives of great Muslim leaders. My favorite subject was Islamic law, where we learned how a perfect Islamic society should function. I dreamed of these laws being followed worldwide. I joined student organizations promoting Islamic values. We organized events and gave presentations about Islam's beauty, working to convince young people that religion mattered more than worldly pleasures. I felt like part of an army fighting ignorance and corruption. At 25, an opportunity came that would change my life completely. Islamic organizations in Europe were looking for educated Muslim women to help teach families who had moved to countries like Germany, France, and the Netherlands. The idea of going to Europe both excited and worried me. I had always lived surrounded by people who shared my faith. Europe seemed like a place where Christianity was strong and people lived against everything I believed was right. But I realized this could be what Allah wanted, to bring His truth where it was needed most. After months of prayer, I accepted an invitation to move to Amsterdam. The organization explained that Muslim women there felt lost about raising their children in a non-Muslim country. They needed someone to teach them how to maintain their Islamic identity in Western society. Arriving in Amsterdam was like entering a different world. The city had canals, bicycles, and tall narrow houses unlike anything in Istanbul. I heard Dutch and English everywhere, languages I had studied but never used daily. What struck me most was seeing how Muslims lived in Amsterdam. Many families seemed to struggle between two worlds. Their children spoke Dutch better than Arabic and asked why they had to follow rules their non-Muslim friends didn't follow. Some mothers told me they felt like they were losing their children to European culture. This confirmed why I was needed. These families needed someone strong in faith to help them stay true to Islam. I organized classes for women, teaching Islamic law, proper dress, and how to raise children according to religious traditions. As you follow along with this powerful testimony of transformation, we invite you to engage with the community. Let us know where you're watching from and share your thoughts on how his journey resonates with you. Your reactions and comments help create a meaningful dialogue around life-changing experiences like these. Let's know where you are watching from. During my first year, I studied the Dutch legal system, dreaming of a future where Islamic family courts could operate alongside Dutch courts. My work caught attention of other Islamic organizations across Europe. I attended conferences in London, Brussels, and Berlin, meeting leaders who shared my vision of strengthening Islam in Western countries. I felt more confident than ever in my mission. I had helped dozens of families and was becoming known throughout the European Muslim community as someone who could be trusted for sound religious guidance. During my third winter in Amsterdam, I was invited to speak at a special gathering of Muslim women from across Europe. The meeting was at a large Islamic center, and I had spent weeks preparing my presentation about maintaining Islamic values in Western society. I arrived early to review my notes in the main prayer hall. As I sat organizing my thoughts in the quiet hall, I became drowsy. The warm, peaceful atmosphere made my eyelids heavy. I told myself I would rest just a few minutes before the other women arrived. But as soon as I closed my eyes, something extraordinary happened. The peaceful quiet was suddenly filled with a presence so powerful that the air itself seemed to vibrate. I opened my eyes, expecting to see someone who had entered, but instead saw a light brighter than anything I had ever experienced. It was like a realm of understanding, without communication. I know anything seen, even things unspoken. At the center of this light stood a figure clothed in brilliant white, with eyes that seemed to burn like flames yet were filled with indescribable love. I knew immediately, without doubt, that this was Jesus, the very one I had mocked and taught others to reject. Then he began to speak, his voice like rushing water, gentle yet commanding, loving yet filled with authority that made every part of my being tremble. He called my name, Amina, and the sound seemed to echo in my very soul. He told me that I must stop what I was doing, turn away from my path, and that he had chosen me for a completely different purpose. As he spoke, I felt like every secret thought and hidden feeling was visible to him. Nothing could be hidden from those burning eyes. He revealed to me that he alone was the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one could come to God the Father except through him. All my years of praying, fasting, and following Islamic law could never bring me to God, because there was only one path to the Father, through Jesus himself. He further revealed to me that, despite all my hatred toward Christians and efforts to work against him, he still loved me with love that would never end. He let me know his love wasn't based on what I had done or failed to do, but simply on who he was, a God of mercy and grace who desired to save rather than condemn me. As he spoke these words about love, I began weeping uncontrollably. Years of anger, pride, and hatred seemed to pour out in those tears. I had spent energy fighting against Christians, never realizing the God they worshipped was pursuing me with love. Suddenly the brilliant light began to fade, but his presence remained. But then something shocking happened. As I tried to lift my head, I realized I could see nothing. The world had gone completely black. Jesus had not only shattered my beliefs, he had taken away my sight. When the other women arrived that evening, they found me sitting on the floor, confused and unable to see. I couldn't tell them Jesus had appeared to me, so I simply said I had suddenly lost my sight and needed help getting home. The conference was canceled. Several women helped me gather my belongings and took me to my apartment. Word spread quickly through the Muslim community that something had happened to me, but I kept the true details to myself. The next few days were some of the darkest of my life. I was trapped in my apartment, dependent on neighbors for food and help with basic tasks. But more than that, I was trapped in my mind, constantly replaying everything Jesus had said. Whether this testimony speaks to your own struggles, offers hope for someone you know, or simply moves you in some way, your voice matters. Join the conversation and be part of a community where real stories of change inspire and encourage others. Your reactions and comments help create a meaningful dialogue around life-changing experiences like these. During those long days in darkness, I began remembering stories about people who claimed to have visions of Jesus. As a Muslim teacher, I had always dismissed these as lies. But now, having experienced something similar, I wondered if some had been telling the truth. I found myself thinking about the Bible story of Saul, who had been a religious leader like me and had hated Christians. It was a story I have long studied. According to the Bible, Jesus had appeared to Saul in bright light while he was traveling, and Saul had been struck blind for 3 days until a Christian man prayed for him. The similarities were impossible to ignore. Like Saul, I had been zealous for my religion. Like Saul, I had opposed Christians. Like Saul, I had been struck blind after encountering Jesus. Was it possible the same God who changed Saul into the Apostle Paul was now working in my life? On the 4th day, I heard a gentle knock. It was my elderly Dutch neighbor, Mrs. van der Berg, holding what smelled like fresh soup. Mrs. van der Berg was a kind Christian woman who had always been friendly, even though I had never hidden my dislike for Christianity. She had often invited me to church events, which I had politely declined. Now, in my time of need, she came to help. As she sat with me, helping me eat, she began talking softly about her faith. She told me she had been praying for me since hearing about my blindness, and that she believed God had a purpose in everything, even difficult things. For the first time in my life, I found myself actually listening to a Christian talk about Jesus without feeling angry. Mrs. van der Berg spoke about Jesus with such genuine love and peace that I couldn't help but be curious. When she offered to read from her Bible, I surprised myself by saying yes. As she read passages about Jesus healing the sick and offering forgiveness to sinners, I felt something stirring in my heart. It was as if the words were somehow alive and speaking directly to my situation. Over the following days, Mrs. van der Berg continued visiting daily, bringing food and comfort, but most importantly, her Bible. Each time she read, I found myself drawn in deeper connection to Jesus and his love for hurting, lost, or rejected people. One afternoon, she read about Jesus healing a man born blind. As she described how Jesus made mud and put it on the man's eyes, then told him to wash, and how the man came back seeing, I began to weep. Could the same Jesus who had healed blind people 2,000 years ago heal me too? Even more powerful were passages about God's love and forgiveness. Mrs. van der Berg read about how Jesus died on the cross to pay for the world's sins, and how anyone who believed in him could have eternal life. She read about how God loved the world so much that he gave his only Son. These words cut deep because I realized that for all my religious devotion, I had never truly felt loved by God. In Islam, I had always felt like I was trying to earn Allah's approval, never sure if I had done enough. Now I was hearing about a God whose love was free and complete. On the 7th day of blindness, I reached my breaking point. I had been wrestling with everything I had experienced and learned. That evening, I found myself on my knees in my living room, surrounded by darkness but sensing I wasn't alone. For the first time, I spoke directly to Jesus, not as a prophet or teacher, but as God Himself. Through my tears, I told Him I believed everything He had shown me was true. I confessed that I had been wrong about Christianity, wrong about His identity, and wrong about the path to God. I admitted that all my Islamic study and teaching had been built on pride and hatred rather than love and truth. I asked Him to forgive me for speaking against Him and working to turn people away from faith in Him. Most importantly, I surrendered my life completely to Him. I told Jesus I wanted Him to be my Lord and Savior, that I wanted to follow Him instead of Islam. I asked Him to take control of my future and use me for His purposes rather than my own plans. As I prayed this prayer of surrender, amazing peace filled my heart, even though I was still in complete darkness. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted, the weight of trying to earn God's approval, the weight of hatred toward others, the weight of pride that had driven me for years. When morning came, I was still on my knees, but something had changed. As dawn's first light entered through my windows, I realized I could see it. Slowly, carefully, I opened my eyes fully and discovered my sight had been completely restored. The world was bright and clear, more beautiful than I remembered. The restoration of my sight was like being born again, physically and spiritually. I spent that first morning walking around my apartment, seeing everything with new eyes. Everything looked different, brighter, more meaningful, filled with hope. My sense of gratitude increases. I began attending Bible studies, eager to learn everything about my new faith. The same hunger for knowledge that had driven me in Islamic studies now drove me to understand the Bible and Christian teachings. I was studying to know God better. One of the most difficult parts was deciding what to do about my work in Amsterdam. I could no longer continue teaching Islamic law or encouraging separation from Christian culture. My entire mission had been based on beliefs I now knew were wrong. After much prayer, I decided to be completely honest with the Muslim community about what had happened. I arranged to meet with Islamic organization leaders who had brought me to Amsterdam. In a conference room where I had once given passionate speeches about Islamic superiority, I now sat humbly and told them about my encounter with Jesus, my blindness, and my conversion. The reaction was exactly what I expected: shock, disbelief, anger, and accusations that I had been deceived or had lost my mind. Some leaders tried convincing me I had experienced Satan's trick. Others suggested I needed medical help. Within weeks, it became clear I could no longer remain in Amsterdam in my former role. The Islamic organizations withdrew their support, and many Muslim women I had taught refused to speak with me. Some warned other Muslims to stay away from me. Rather than feeling discouraged, I felt freedom. I began sharing my testimony with anyone who would listen. I spoke at Mrs. Vanderberg's church about how Jesus had pursued me when I was his enemy and transformed my heart completely. I also reached out to other Muslim women, not to argue or force conversion, but simply to share the love and hope I had found in Jesus. Each time I shared my story, I saw how God used it to touch hearts. Some Muslims who heard began questioning their beliefs, while Christians were encouraged to be bolder in sharing their faith. I realized Jesus hadn't saved me just for a better life, but to use my story as a tool for reaching others trapped in darkness. But in all these, the cost of following Jesus continued to be high. I lost many friendships, faced ongoing family rejection, and had to find completely new ways to support myself. But every sacrifice seemed small compared to the joy and peace I had found in knowing Jesus personally. You don't need to be a preacher to share your faith. Simply live in a way that shows others the joy and peace that come from knowing Jesus. When friends ask why you're different, tell them about your relationship with God. When people go through difficult times, offer to pray with them and share how Jesus has helped you. My dear brothers and sisters, I once was blind but now I see. I once was lost but now I am found. I once was an enemy of the cross but now I am a servant of the King. If Jesus can transform someone like me, he can do amazing things through your life too. Trust him completely, love him wholeheartedly, serve him faithfully, and never forget that you are precious children of the Most High God. He has plans for your life better than anything you could imagine for yourself. Follow him wherever he leads, and you will never regret the journey. In Christ's love, Amina.